Hey friends, Leigh Brown here with One Community Real Estate, and welcome back to Real Estate from the Rooftops. I'm having to record my intro separately because frankly, my guest on this episode, we just dialed in, and her breadth of knowledge and expertise in the investor side of real estate and in her advocacy for housing providers. I'm learning how to stop saying landlords and say housing providers like Stacey Johnson-Cosby will do in this episode. So get your notepad, get your ink pen. I wrote down all of these notes while she was talking. You're not going to want to miss this. And I can't wait to hear what you think of Stacey and the amazing work that she's doing. So before you dial into the next gap, hit pause, hit subscribe in 5 stars because you don't want to miss any more of this. And check out this amazing woman. So tell me what we're talking about today, because Tracy said we should know each other because we're both big nerds when it comes to legislative things and property rights. And I want to know more about what you do. I know your sister is the Queen Safety Lady, and she is totally planting her stake in that, and I love it. So tell me about you.
Well, my goal, okay, I'm a real estate agent like 33 years. So I've been licensed 33 years. I'm licensed in Kansas and Missouri, so I sell houses. And I like that, do well at that. But somewhere along the line, you start seeing things happening in the community and on the sidelines. And so the thing that's getting my attention nowadays is the fact that private property rights are under assault. And there are a lot of the socialist tenant movements. I don't know if you get to see those. Do you see them?
You have to watch what happens in California, right? Because what happens in California bleeds out across the country. It hits your area on its way to my area. And we have a lot of colleagues that they'll just say that would never happen here. But when it enters the public discourse, it becomes something that can happen there. And we see the arguments here, especially right now, pandemic wise, people can't pay their rent. So they're running into the space of we shouldn't have to, and government should provide free housing for everybody. And why do you need to own anything? And it turns into a really negative conversation, because if you lower the bar to what they're suggesting, then there's no hope for anybody to do anything for their family or for themselves. And growth is good.
And not only that, but someone like my husband and I, 25 years investors. So we're landlords or housing providers, as we like to call ourselves. My husband retired about two and a half years ago. A lot of our income is generated from our rental properties. And so it's a source of retirement funding, and that will be mine as well when I stop selling houses. And so it's important not only from a tenant's point of view, from needing somewhere to live and being able to make their payment, but it's important from our point of view. And in our industry, I forgot what the percentage is, but a large number of real estate agents are also investors. And that is something that we need to preserve our income, but more importantly, our housing market. I did a survey. I started an organization here in Kansas City, in our Kansas City area, and we're an alliance of housing providers. And so that means we have landlord organizations. I have the leaders of those groups with me. So that means landlord organizations. That means property management organizations, realtors, and what am I missing? Investor groups. All of us are at the table, and we're looking at all the things going on, because what we do and what's important to us is preserving housing, the industry as it is. And so I did a survey of our members, and probably a little over 40, or about 40% said that because of the lack of income and the eviction moratorium, they will sell their properties. It's going to devastate our rental housing market, and it just will. And the eviction moratoriums are not helpful at all. The eviction moratoriums help no one. It doesn't help the tenant, doesn't help the community, the neighborhood, and it definitely doesn't help us, the housing provider. And so it's just the government's answer. There's a non-answer that is going to be devastating.
So Stacey, don't you find it to be alternately fascinating and frustrating that people aren't reading beyond a quick headline where it says, hey, tenants don't have to pay rent so they don't get evicted during the pandemic? Sounds really great on a headline. Then you read 2 sentences in and find out what happens to the back tent, what happens in January, what happens to the landlord who can't make their payment, what happens to legislation that says you as a landlord. I love that though. Housing provider, love that, stealing it, wrote it down. So
well, we want it stolen. We want that used. We want to change the terminology.
Right.
Landlord out.
Because that gets associated with slumlords. And people think about the television programs they've watched in the movies where landlords are never put into a positive light. But most landlords, I think the number nationally is 72% of our housing providers are people who own less than 8 units. And so it's people like, well, you might have more than 8 units, but I have 8. And so it's me and the other small mom and pops. You're probably a medium mom and pop. 25 years is a lot of investment portfolio, but still, it's not the hedge funds. It's people. And I'm very curious about your alliance. Are you including the hedge funds in your alliance, like the BlackRocks and the Invitation Homes and the guys that are buying blocks of houses?
We're the small to medium sized independent housing providers. So the mom and pops, and a lot of my peers don't like being called mom and pops, but that's what it is. And that's what people, I mean, that's just easy. It is. It's
just a phrase. People need to stop think phrases are offensive. It's just a phrase. So I'm curious though, with your research, because you were doing boots on the ground to find these people, how did you find the people to add to your alliance? Did you go to the tax records? Did you put out a survey? How did you find people, Stacey?
Okay, so about a little over 2 years ago in our city, I'm in Kansas City, we had a rental inspection, a council member that wanted to introduce an ordinance with a rental inspection program. And so we all came out of the woodwork for that. Everybody just kind of came out and we started testifying, before the council. And luckily it was killed in the council committee, but that council person took it out to the people in the community, put out, they did a ballot initiative. So it ended up on the ballot. We ended up losing because it was called Healthy Homes Rental Inspection. And so who goes to the ballot and says no to healthy homes? And so what we did, we kind of worked together. And what we found is that we narrowed the gap. We educated a lot of people on what it was. And we know that the gap could have been wider. It could have been worse had we not been there. And so we were able to impact it in that way. But the beauty is that all of us were already there. So all I did after that was over, and I said, okay, you, let's meet, let's talk. And we just pulled ourselves together and we ended up forming our alliance. And we, as a matter of fact, we formed our alliance after it failed the city council committee. We became official at that point, and before it went to the ballot initiative, because we knew it would be coming up. And so we said, let's get together and get prepared to answer the question. The question was, if there's a problem with the quality of housing, and if slumlords, if people are allowed to have substandard properties out there, that's a problem. What can we do? And so our goal was to work on answering that. And so we pulled together, there were ordinances, maybe 13 to 14 ordinances already on the books that if they would have enforced them, would have answered the question. They were already on the books. And there was also another rental inspection ordinance out there too. And so we're trying to go around and say, hey guys, it's already here, but that doesn't work. And so we were trying to be proactive, and then that got on the ballot. And so we turned to a campaign. We actually formed a campaign. And because of the realtors raised over $100,000 for that campaign. And we, again, like I said, we lost, but we closed the gap in what was expected. And we educated a lot of people. And the beauty is, we made lemons out of lemonade. We made lemonades out of lemon. And we ended up together.
How many of your council members knew about those existing ordinances that were on the books that you guys did the research on?
Well, did it matter? It didn't matter.
I'm just curious, because you and I both know our elected officials are, to their credit, they're buried in a million different topics from a million different directions. And nobody goes back and looks at old regulatory affairs and old legislative items on the books.
But that's a problem. That's a problem. If they're there and if they're considering, and the person who chaired that housing committee is now our mayor, he didn't, I mean, they don't know. As a matter, just full disclosure, I ran for council our last election a year and a half or 2 years ago. I ran, but it's a long story why I didn't win up. I should have been there. And I'll tell you, this is kind of a political aside. If I happen to be a Democrat, and I'm not a Democrat, nor am I a Republican, I'm independent. If I was a Democrat, I'd be on the council this day, representing the voices of our housing providers. But it's a nonpartisan situation. But they had to find a Democrat to run against me in a Democrat city. So in any event, I am, as an independent, just marginalized in many ways. But more importantly, it just energized me to make sure I still represented the voice for the housing industry, because that it wasn't on our council before. It's not there now. And at a time when our city says that we're in a housing crisis, they need to do their homework. You asked Leigh why they don't, how many of them knew about it. Every single one of them should. And if nothing else, after we alerted them to it, they should have. They should have said, oh, okay, never acknowledged it, including, like I said, our current mayor. It's just like it's over their head. It's like, and this is clear to me. You see it, you hear about it, but it is clear to me. If they have an agenda to do something in a different way, it doesn't matter what the reality or what the facts are. And that's unfortunate. So I am working like I always have from the outside. And so I have our group and among our KC Regional Housing Alliance and our member organizations that represent probably well over 100,000 rental units in our region. And so the way I'm positioning us and we position ourselves is we're the voice for housing providers. And we make ourselves available for our council members and our state, any state legislative officials, county, anyone. We make ourselves available. If you're doing something housing related, housing policy, you have a question, call us, ask the question, bounce it off us first and say, hey, is this a good idea? Or how will it impact you? Or what do you think about this? They don't do it. And so we have to insert ourselves into the political discussion in other ways.
Okay, so how do we replicate the alliance that you've put together in your area with all of these really different viewpoints and different stakeholders with common goals in mind to speak information? And I hate to say speak truth because people use that to define truth, but to speak information to situations that are at hand without creating bad legislation to fight. Because as you said, people came out of the woodwork to find their voices together, and that's how you created the group. How do we do this elsewhere, Stacey? Because this needs to be replicated. What you're doing is crazy important. And I look at what we do as realtors. You know, you and I do the work with the realtor associations. We work for property rights, but too often our elected officials look at us as just talking for the realtors, when in reality, you and I speak for the buyers and sellers we serve and for the buyers and sellers of the future. And when those buyers and sellers and property owners come to the table with us, we really fade into the background because they want to hear their anecdote. So how do we take your success and next level it and roll it out across different states? I mean, I want one here because I'll tell you, we're having a conversation just this morning. I'm on the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, and our focus is low-income housing because you've got to have solutions across the price point and socioeconomic spectrum. So we're looking at the coming foreclosures because of the moratorium and how it's going to hit people. How do we reach those housing providers throughout the state, because they are not in the National Association of Housing Providers. They're not in everybody's database because many of them are owners of 1 and 2 and 4 units. They don't own blocks. They own grandma's house that they kept as an investment property. That's their extra cash flow. So I'm just sitting here thinking, golly, Moses, I need you in North Carolina like yesterday so that you can help build this out. But I'm so curious what your thoughts are now that you're in it. You've got 100,000 units. That's huge. That's a lot of doors you're speaking for.
It is. It's so interesting you say that. So one of the members of our REIA group here she said the tenant organizations, and that the socialist tenant organizations, People's Actions and all of them, the ones who we're basically nowadays having to push against, who are the ones who are that our current battle against private housing rights are against. She said they're so organized and they're national, and they have cohesive messages and they can speak with one voice across the country. She said, why don't we have that? And so leave it to Stacey to look for a challenge. And so we are building that right now nationally. And I'm going to invite you to join us. And so what we do is we meet like every Friday at this point, and we are literally grassroots trying to build it. We're creating like what we did here locally. We want to create that nationally so that when we speak with one voice across the country, that we have a coherent message, that we're all saying the same thing. And maybe then we'll get some of the traction that the tenant groups have. Because every time you turn on the news, just this morning, Tracy sent me a message, hey, on CNN, someone's talking about they're going to be, they lost their job, they're going to be evicted. Their stories are out there. The tenant side of the stories are there. What about us? What about the 30% of the members in my survey who took the survey who said that they can't even make their own mortgage payment? And then now, because of the eviction moratoriums, specifically the CDC eviction moratorium, not only must they make their payment and cover and protect their home, but now they have to take care of those 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 tenants that they have and cover their living costs too. Ridiculous, and it doesn't make sense. And that is a government mandate that says, hey, Leigh, if your property, if your tenant cannot pay, you cannot kick them out. You cannot do what you need to do to collect your rent. You must shelter them free of charge because we said so. Really.
For any of you viewers that are watching this video, what you should know about the way this works is it's not just the rent money that we miss as housing providers. If your heat goes, by law, we have to provide heat. If your water heater goes, by law, we have to do maintenance. And so now you're asking your housing providers to go without rent and possibly come out of pocket on repairs. And we're not talking daddy warbucks. We're talking normal people who are managing cash flow and may have a little bit of an emergency buffer, but that reserve doesn't last forever. And so there's a lot of issues that get compounded there. And I'd love for you, Stacey, you've mentioned the socialist nature of the tenant groups a couple of times. Let's give a hard example of that. I mean, of course, I'm immediately thinking about those people who squatted in the vacant property in San Francisco, then one ran for city council declaring that it was their property because they were in it. And that's the kind of messaging we're fighting in a world that should have some kind of reason to it. So can you give some examples about what you're referencing?
And I want to say that too, Leigh, that is in the messaging now too, squatting and taking over vacant property. So that was in California, but now it's getting across the nation and it's in their messaging. I'm seeing that now and it scares me to death. And so one of the things that their goal is the People's Action. And so 2 years ago, so 2 years ago, we did the rental inspection. So within the last year, we all of a sudden heard this, our current mayor said something about a Bill of Rights, a tenant Bill of Rights. And one of our people happened to catch it at the city council level. So one of my goals, one of my tips is to watch what's going on with your city council. You said, what do you do locally? Watch the docket for the city council and the agenda. Watch what they're doing. Somebody happened to catch it. And then we had less than 2 weeks to get to the housing committee of the council to testify. No one gave us any kind of warning, and they know who we are. Trust me, the council members, they know us, they know who we are. No one gave us a warning, so all of a sudden we show up, and we're in the council chambers, and it's a big room. And so there may be 10 of us, because on last minute notice we tried to pull together, there may have been 10 of us, and there were probably 80 or so people in yellow t-shirts with signs. That's our local tenant group. They were already there, they were organized. As a matter of fact, they worked with the mayor to come up with the tenant Bill of Rights. And so that Bill of Rights would give them some of the things they wanted. They wanted us to have to rent to them, regardless of eviction history, source of income, whether it's like a voucher program, Section 8, or if it's just all cash and where is this money coming from, we don't know. And eviction history, criminal history, source of income, those are things where they said, hey, we have a right. Housing is a right. There's a guarantee for housing. And that's a national movement. You see that nationally. As a matter of fact, Bernie Sanders endorsed this particular group, free housing. And so we were watching that and we testified that day. And one of the things we learned is the mayor, the mayor's attorney, and the leader of that socialist tenants group, they met and pulled together this written legislation, this Bill of Rights. And there were all kinds of things in it that, if you go over it, you're looking at it, it's like, oh my God, no. And so anyway, they got together to work that out. And so during my testimony, I said, we want a chance. We should be at the table too. It shouldn't just be, the policymakers and the tenants. We want to be at the table too. And so we got that agreement. As soon as the meeting's over, I go over to the mayor's attorney. I said, we need to make an appointment. She was gracious and agreed. And we went over to the leader of the tenants group. They call themselves Conrads and tenant leaders. That's what they call themselves. They really do. And out loud in public with pride. If you look at if you go to the hashtag rent strike or cancel rent, you'll see some of the groups around the country, these tenant organizations, they're organizing for unions. So I went over to her and said, okay, let's meet. And she said, Stacey, you stay over there and do your thing. Leave us alone here. It's like, really? That's the spirit of cooperation? When we are two sides of the same coin, tenants and the housing providers. We need each other. One can't work without the other. We must have each other. But they have to set it up in their mind and their policies. There has to be an enemy. We are the enemy. We are the greedy profiteers. We are the, what is the last thing we call us? We are the oppressors, all of those. And just that language, and it's very clear, it's out there. And we have people, policymakers at state levels, federal level, and local levels that agree with them. And they're making our policy. So with the Tenant Bill of Rights, we ended up going on a whole tour. We met with all of our council members one-on-one. We met with the mayor's attorney, and we worked on changing their document and getting it. And we were able to blunt some of the hard things in there. There was language in there saying we were a racist city and all kinds of negative things that if anybody's looking at this, they're thinking, why would I move to Kansas City? Why would I do business there? And so we were able to get a lot of that out. And some of the negative things. Now we can't force a landlord to take a Section 8 voucher if they don't want to. We were this close to getting that done. And so anyway, we ended up pushing and pushing. We ended up with the second meeting of the council. The committee, they reconvened. And this time the room was tilted. And we had probably over 100 of us in the room and a handful of them in the room. And then the mayor, smart, and this is the one way he's smart, in the beginning, he said, how many people are here to speak against the Bill of Rights? The overwhelming majority of us, we got ourselves together and got the word out. We were there and we were represented. And then their group was smaller. So it was clear to them that we are here. And we came out, we turned out in big numbers the second time because our network is strong now. We're together and all we have to do is put the word out to the leaders and it gets out to all the members. And so anyway, I forgot what your question was, but the examples of social.
Well, I mean, this is an example right here, though, because it's the belief that all of the rights belong to one side.
And they're creating that. We know that's not true. We know that all of us are just as important, but they are creating that, and that narrative is catching on. So their national platform, they want 12 million public housing units available across the country. So what they want projects. They want to create the projects again. And in so many of our cities, they've been known to not work and they've been demolished. Ours are gone. And then there are other cities across the country. And we were just reading in papers locally and on the website locally where there are situations in Indiana. There was a project there that they're moving the people out. They had to move people out. And a lot of them are older, 100 people. They had to get out of there because the building is not in safe condition. That's the government for a landlord. You want that again? In Indiana, 250 people have to get out of the building because it's unsafe. And that's happening all over the country. So government is not a good landlord. Government does not do landlording really well. But that's what they want. And to get there, to get the 12 million free government-owned public housing projects, which, by the way, will be in suburban neighborhoods. They want to go into wealthy white neighborhoods. It's kind of a reparation for all of the things that have happened in the past. That's where they want to move the projects, is out into these suburbs. And so all of this is just crazy in general. And so what we're fighting against that right now. That's what we're fighting against. They're using the pandemic as a tool to get there. You know how they say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. They turned the pandemic. Before that, they were kind of out there just grasping and finding ways. The pandemic has been wonderful for them because now they're asking for free rent and to cancel rent. Housing is a right. People should not have to pay for housing. It should be guaranteed. Oh, pandemic, there's a problem. People shouldn't leave their houses and we shouldn't have them pay for it. And so rent should be free. Evictions, the eviction, they should stop evictions. That's the goal. Their goal to end evictions. And they want the CDC eviction moratorium to be extended so that people can continue living rent-free in their homes forever. And so this is their way to get that to happen. And unfortunately, that they're having some success with that.
The conversation about moving the projects to the suburbs, which you and I both know the government should not be in charge of anything, that we need to be efficiently run. We small governments better. That's what independents tend to believe. And the public-private partnerships can work, and they're working in a lot of different areas when you're looking for solutions to low income. But that whole conversation that happened during the election about the suburbs was about zoning. And we know that it wasn't about racial issues as much as it was about zoning. And if you can wipe out single-family zoning, you can put anything you want wherever you want. And don't you find it to be incredibly racist that the conversation from these tenant rights groups immediately assumes that all the homeowners are white and all the tenants in government projects are black? I find that to be a pretty nasty form of racism because my neighborhood's full of, it's like a tapestry. There's one of everybody, and that's why I love it.
Right. And see, that is, and a lot of their assumptions are absolutely racist. I'm so glad you see that, because I think a lot of our policymakers don't. And remember, the issue in the campaign about the suburbs was the Obama era affirmatively furthering fair housing. And it absolutely was about race, though, Leigh. It was, because the whole goal was to put what they considered the minorities. And again, that racist assumption that those people who are in the lower income ranges are poor are automatically Black. So how do you get them into the wealthy neighborhoods in the suburbs?
Which must be white. That's what drives me crazy, is that we need to look at people's upward mobility, not their skin color. It's crazy.
Right. And we need to look at home ownership. All of these people who are fighting and spending all of this time on tenants' rights. Why? I mean, that's great. Some people need to rent, some people want to rent, but own your own home and you don't have to worry about any of that. And so, and we know that if they are looking at those people being lower income or poor, that doesn't have to be the case. You own your home. And we know that home ownership is the first step into the middle class, and the way that most people and a lot of people build wealth, and generational wealth too. You own your home and you pass it along to your family, or like we do, you go out and buy more. And so, and then that is an empire, a dynasty, and a legacy that you're passing on to future generations. My husband and I, we don't have children. And so what are we doing with what we have? We guarantee for our family, for our nieces and great nieces and nephews, that none of them will be poor again. You don't have to be. And so our properties, and we're trying to think of the best way to do this, will be left for our nieces and nephews to have for a long time. So that income coming from those properties, and then just building the equity and the value of those properties, that's in our family. That's our family legacy for our nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews. And we are deliberately doing that. I want more people to do that. Everybody's not stuck being a renter or tenant and always have to fight for tenant rights. Let's take care of them and make sure that the properties they live in are in, good condition and dignified condition. But let's put our focus on getting people stabilized in their home. And one of the best ways to do that is to own a home. But short of that, there are some things that we can do with renters during this pandemic. And that's one of the things that our organization is working on, is making sure they can stay stabilized in their homes and safe. The kids can be kids and study, and the parents can focus on parenting and working. And we're asking for more rental assistance. If you're going to put the CDC eviction moratorium, which impacts 95% of us landlords, some of the state moratoriums didn't hit us, but then the CDC eviction moratorium, almost every housing provider is impacted. And so that got a lot of people's attention, and that's where our national group is coming in. And what we're looking at is how to advocate for more rental assistance instead of extending the CDC eviction moratorium, which may be happening once it expires at the end of this year. We say, if you extend it, attach rental assistance to it. But better yet, don't extend it. Let's get the rental, focus on those funds and getting that the stimulus or whatever you need to do with the rental assistance. Get that into the hands of the people that need it so they can pay the rent. And so we're focused on putting together a rental assistance package that is attractive to us and that will help our tenants and will keep them housed and will keep us in business, actually.
Well, and you also want to look at the fact that if the rental assistance goes into the hand of the tenants, some tenants will pay their rent. Some tenants will say there's an iPhone 12 out. And so part of the ask right now is, when you take care of the housing providers, it should be direct deposit or go to the person who's got to cover the person living there. And I do love that you mentioned the empathy that many housing providers have had. I think everybody that I know has worked with tenants who have been affected by the pandemic, whether they've lost hours or lost income. They've done a lot of stuff behind the scenes to help people stay in their good, stable housing environments, because we love to take care of great tenants. And many of us have worked deals to make sure that's a possibility. And I wish that were a bigger part of the conversation, because people always, like we already said this before, they make the assumption that landlords are evil. Landlords love taking care of their tenants because some people have no intention to own, even though we provide that opportunity. But I have to jump to a different angle here altogether, because I love what you and your husband are doing, because more than what you're doing with your empire building through investment houses, you're giving an entire generation the idea that they can be in charge of their own destiny, that whether or not they work in a W-2 professional job, they can build their own dreams through real estate, and they can manage what you give them. They could take the income from whatever comes from you and they could build a different business. But you're educating them on how expansive real estate is. And I even worry about that with some of our professional colleagues. They get focused on buy your primary residence and then somebody else buy your primary residence. And they forget that every person they come in contact with may want to know about the future that you've built for 25 years. And it might not happen today, but couldn't that be part of your dream? I mean, we have access to so many different pathways. And I love that you're educating that next generation that this is what we've done. We want y'all to take this and go next level with it. That's huge. It's not about hoarding the money. It's about sharing the knowledge.
And they've seen us. They've seen my husband go cut the yards. Like he'll cut on a Saturday, maybe 10, 12 yards, whatever it is. He'll go out and cut yards. They know that he's doing that. They know when we're talking to tenants and stuff. And you know, like you said, the government as a landlord is not going to be like us. Like, you know, if someone's a little late on their rent, we're going to work it out with them. And neither is that corporate landlord, the Wall Street landlord you're talking about. And if we're out of business and we end up selling our properties because of losing the income during the pandemic or whatever, that's who's going to come in and buy it up. It's going to be those corporate landlords. So they need to keep us in business. So that's what we keep saying, keep us around. And we are, of course, compassionate because we are just like our tenants. And many of us are suffering during these days, just like the tenants are. And just on a regular basis, I have to tell people that helping them out now and working with them on their payment arrangements, that's not new to us. That's life. Any given month, at any time, someone loses a job or has a car repair that pops up. And then, you know, can I wait a little bit? I found out from one of my tenants quite accidentally that my husband had actually loaned her money to pay a gas bill. I had no idea. And so it's just things that we do just because, you know, as smaller landlords, we're human and we're just like our tenants, and people don't give us credit for that. And something else that we've done, our KC Regional Housing Alliance, and by the way, we're on Facebook, and some of the stuff we've done is on Facebook. We just this past week, last Thursday, we did an event, a resource summit, because we know that people, for some of the CARES money is disappearing at the end of the year. It's going to be gone, needs to be spent. And that's for rental assistance, utility assistance, mortgage assistance, money's out there for food. We partnered with the United Way. And we said, you know, you have money that needs to be spent. A lot of people don't know that there are resources out there. And so if you need to pay your rent, get the job, get the resources. So we did a virtual resource summit on Zoom. And we also went live across Facebook. And we had, I don't know how many hundreds of people with us that day, where we had organizations saying, I do have, you know, funds for utility assistance, and here's how to reach me. I have rental assistance, mortgage assistance. Here's how to reach me. Go to this website, call this number. Here's how to go. And the library will help people fill out applications. If they're online applications, the library will work one-on-one to help people fill it out to get assistance. So all of this money is out there. The assistance is out there. So what we did is, like we normally do as an organization, we put the word out to our peers and said, hey guys, come join us so you can know this out here. Bring your tenants and other organizations that serve people. I put it out to our school district that has homeless students. I put it out everywhere. We tried to get the tenant group to put it out. They didn't, because they don't care about people having rental assistance. They ignored me. They absolutely did not post it on their social media. I sent a direct response. If your goal really is to help tenants, here's a way to help keep them in their home with rent paid. They didn't join us on that. So we did that event virtually. To this day, Leigh, I'm getting calls saying, you know, I need help with rental assistance. Like, okay, I don't do that. I don't provide it. And then I point them back to our Facebook page that has the video of the event. And this summer, a few months ago, we did a job fair. You know, we were hearing people having problems with the evictions and losing their jobs. We did a job fair, and the focus of the job fair were jobs that paid $15 an hour or more. Because again, people are saying that's the living wage or the wage they need to have. And, you know, we need to raise the wage. No, you don't. There are jobs out there. We had almost 30 employers representing over 300 jobs that are available today. They came on the line, and we sat there all day. And just from this very desk, and we back to back heard every employer saying, here's what I have, here's how to reach me, here are the openings. And we just did the virtual job fair back to back, and people were out there. We did that Facebook Live, and we were on Zoom, and they're typing questions in the chat. You know, if you have a criminal record or a felony record, you know, do you hire? Do you hire people that are 18 years old, or do you need to have experience? They're asking those questions, and in real time, our employers were answering the questions. And it's so funny because we know that with jobs, that you have to know somebody to get a good job in a good company. So we had the great companies, big companies out there, Coca-Cola, FedEx, and all of those. And our theme that day was, if you know somebody, you have a better chance of getting a job. It's all who you know. And so we literally had our recruiters on that day saying, you know, here's my phone number. So you submit an application and you need to follow up with it. Now I have someone, a recruiter that I can call and say, hey, what's going on? And so we are empowering people, tenants. We're solutions-based. We're business people. You see a problem, how do you solve it? People can't find jobs, let's help them. You know, people can't find the resources to stay in their rental units because they may be evicted, let's help them. We're business people first and foremost, and with a heart. And so we do events like that to help people and do what we can.
All right. So how did you find the business owners to promote their jobs? Did you go through the chamber or through a BNI network or through your own networks? How did you get that consolidated into that one video feed? Because I think this is so brilliant. Why did the voters not elect you? Oh my gosh, they missed out.
Right. I mean, they did.
Different discussion, but it's okay.
Right. But then I get to work here in the community and do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. I get to focus on stuff that I really want to. So, and so what we did the very first time, we have like a big corporation in our town, like the biggest corporation in our state, Cerner Corporation. So 2 years ago, and I started another organization in my part of the town, South Kansas City. I built another organization there in my community, just for our neighborhoods and businesses. And so they reached me then and said, this is maybe 3 years ago, and said, Stacey, we're bringing a new division on with 600, openings all at once. And we want to hire from the community. We need your help to try to fill those positions. And so I'm brainstorming with them, and we came up with the idea of a job fair. And back then we did it in person. And so, and those jobs happen to pay $15 an hour with benefits, no degree required. And so it's like, okay, if we're going to do something for them, we can't leave out our other businesses, because we have other businesses in South Kansas City, in our part of the city, that may have been hiring too. I picked up the phone literally, Leigh, and called the businesses that I knew about. Every single one of them had immediate job openings that paid $15 an hour or more, except one. And so that job fair we did in person, we had maybe 11, 12 employers, and 400 people showed up. And so this time, another one of our housing providers, Kim, I mentioned earlier with one of our REIA groups, she said she's been seeing a lot of investors looking for people to hire on our rehab projects. And so she's been thinking about a job fair, and we got together and said, let's just do it from our industry. And we did it virtually. And so she put the word out on Facebook to some of the other investor groups, and we got a few of them there. And then I'm watching the news, reading the paper. If I see someone, an employer that's hiring, I picked up the phone, called, and invited the ones that participated before, and just literally I don't say grassroots, but just we looked and saw who's hiring and invited them. And they almost every single person we invited said yes. And all of them had job openings paying over $15 an hour. That magical number. And the jobs are out there, is my point.
Well, and everything you say goes against all the narratives that the public is being fed.
I know.
Because the public is fed the narrative that tenants don't want to pay. We know as landlords, our tenants want to pay because they know that there's housing being provided. And if they're out of work, many people want to work because they love the dignity that comes from completing a job and being paid for work well done. And they want to have something to do during the day to be productive in the community. They want to be a part of their own future. They don't want the government to run their lives. And golly Moses, the messaging out there is just so negative, because it would tell all of us that we're supposed to stop everything and sit down and be cared for by somebody else. But your numbers demonstrate that that's not what people want. All they need is for somebody to do exactly what you're doing and crack open the door so they can walk through. You've talked about the empathy of landlords, how much work we can do when we get together, the desire of tenants who are in rough waters to find their way through. I mean, everything you do is solutions based. And so
we're business people.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. So let's fix that narrative, right? People think that business people are greedy and we're only out for money. But we also know that there is a glory and a beauty in profit, because that comes from a job well done. And a job well done by its nature takes care of other people and helps them find their jobs that are well done too. So you get to have better tenants when you help your community. You have a stronger real estate business when the economy is strong and employers are happy in Kansas City. So I have to ask you a big picture question before I let you go here, because I think I could talk to you for like days, because you are freaking amazing. So when you become like the queen of the world, what would you suggest to anybody watching this, whether they're a realtor who's trying to figure out how to protect their community from negative policies and they want to provide opportunities? I do think most realtors want to be in that space of providing opportunities, or to the landlord who wants to help create this in their market, or to the elected official who happens to watch this that wants to do a better job. What do you think we should focus on as taxpayers, voters, entrepreneurs in local markets? What should our task be in 2021?
for us to do what we do best. And to me, that means being a voice for housing, whether it's home ownership or investors and investing in real estate as a way to build and create wealth and generational wealth, for us to make ourselves available to your local, your council members, your state reps and senators, your county legislators. There are a lot of different angles. And so if you pull together, and literally all I did, leaders of organizations that are already out there, it's just a matter of stitching them together. There are some landlord groups that are out there, some investor groups, and a lot of them are on Facebook, and there are property management groups and the realtors. Get the leaders of those groups to the table and sit down and say, okay, what is our first order of business? And I'm going to tell you, this socialist movement that's out there, it's everywhere. Everyone needs to watch for it. And if you look at those hashtags that I mentioned, you'll find the groups that we're working against, unfortunately, those people who think that everyone wants something for free, who they want something free. And so we
tell us those hashtags one more time.
It's cancel rent and rent strike. Those are two of them. And if you find those, you'll find the groups in your neighborhoods that are working against private property rights, that their whole goal is to disincentivize real estate ownership. They don't think anyone should own real estate, including the individual homeowner, and especially us as housing providers. We're, profiteers. We're just the oppressor or the profiteers, and it's profit over people. But they don't know their profit is our income. That's how we live. And they think we just get over on the tenants. And something else, if someone, and I also have a heart for the homeless, whether it's homeless veterans or homeless students, if you are a housing provider and you have rental properties, check with your school districts through the McKinney-Vento program. There are homeless students in our communities. If you can pull together, and there's something else we're doing, because I'm part of two programs. We have 700 homeless students in two of my school districts here. Our impact program are volunteers pulling together to house those families. I mean, we're replicating a program that has a 95% success rate, and within 3 years, housed 600 and something homeless students. We're replicating those in our district. They're helping us. But one thing that we have is a shortage of affordable housing. Let us create that housing. And so if you have housing available in a district to rent, call the district and talk to the McKinney-Vento, the person who helps homeless students, and said, how are your families finding homes? What my husband and I ended up doing is we couldn't find anything in our district, because I get the call, Stacey, we have a family that's been through the classes. They're ready to be housed. They're ready for their second chance. We had nothing out there. So my husband and I pulled together some investors, and we're buying the houses that came up on the market. They come up on the market. And my husband and I bought one a couple months ago. And as we renovate it, we're inviting our families to watch us so they can learn how to do that. So that's a project that serves two purposes. But we bought a home for one of our families. So when that's ready, one of our homeless families is going into that. And so every district has those. So if you have properties, reach out. And veterans, the same thing. Veterans are important to me too. Have a family full of them, both parents and sisters and all that. And so anyway, just there are places for you to find opportunities. But I think it starts by pulling together and getting an agenda in place. And the biggest agenda is already out there watching for us, the social. If you look up People's Action, that is the big national group that all of these other groups fall under. And you'll see their manifesto online. The People's Action is the housing guarantee. If you read that, after you get up off the floor, after you read it, and close your mouth up and gather yourself together, that is what we're working against. That's the biggest threat to private property ownership. And a lot of, you see the socialists, AOC and all of them, that's what they're working from. And Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, that's what they're working from. And it's filtered down. We need to watch where that goes and watch the legislatures, our state, watch their housing committees and your local council committees and see what they're doing. And that gets you your agenda. But know that those people, the socialist tenants rights groups, they're everywhere. And they hit us like a brick 2 years ago, but we're responding and we're having some success. And these programs that we're doing paint the picture that we're not what they paint us to be. We're helping or trying to help them.
Stacey, you're ridiculously amazing. I am so grateful to your sister for introducing me to you. And for anybody that's watching this and wants to learn more from you, maybe they want to buy real estate in Kansas City. I know you sell houses, and I don't know where you have time for all these things. I thought I was busy, but holy smokes, you're like crazy. But if they want to get involved in your organizations, buy a house from you, learn how to invest. If they want to fund you when you run for office in the future, because you'll have a campaign account in the next 2 to 4 years, probably you'll You'll say yes. Look at you. So when something happens in your life they want to support or learn from, what's the best way for people to reach you?
They can reach me by phone. They can text me. The text is probably easiest. It's 816-591-5921. Again, 816-591-5921. My email address, I'll make it easy, is the KCRegionalHousingAlliance@gmail.com. So KCRegionalHousingAlliance, and that's where we are on social media as well. If you want to look at our Facebook page and see what we're doing. And then the national group that I mentioned, it's the National Housing Provider Coalition. And that is on Facebook too. And we're building that group from the ground up. And we are looking for someone from every state. We probably have 9 or 10 states represented, but we need people from all 50 states so that we can pull together and have a big national cohesive voice with one message. So that way we can effectively, as small and independent, small and medium independent housing providers, have a voice in policy. Because there's stuff that's happening. And we have a website too, the National Housing Provider Coalition, .org. And so we're out there, we're working, and we're just building coalitions. And that's me.
I wrote a heart easy notes while you're talking.
Okay, very good.
That's what I kept looking down here. I have to write down everything you said. I appreciate you on so many levels for not only putting yourself in the ring to run for office, because that's a hard thing to do, but taking that experience and scaling it in a way that's way above and beyond what you probably could have accomplished on city council. I mean, you're going to have major national impact. So the next time you go to the beach, if y'all drive towards North Carolina, y'all should stop through and we'll go to the beach together and we'll just brainstorm how to save the world. But thank you for coming on to talk to me today. Friends who have listened to this, I will have all of Stacey's contact information in the notes for this episode so that you can find it when you didn't write down her phone number and now you're thinking about rewinding. Don't worry. But I'm definitely going to get you tied into some of the groups that I'm working with, and let's see if we can't create bigger coalitions so we can do great things. But thank you for what you do for everybody. I mean, this is huge, and I'm so appreciative.
There are a lot of us like that. We just need to spotlight, and that's what we're doing too, is we're sharing our stories and who we are with the national media. We're doing that.
Well, I can't wait to support what you're doing. I can't wait to dial into it and get involved.
Thank you. And thank you for doing what you're doing. You do a wonderful thing too. And thank you, Leigh. And thank you for having me today.
Well, I can't wait to meet you in person soon, and please keep going, keep battling.
I will. I promise I will.
All right. I'll see you soon.
And thank you.